Okay, so the topic we're going to look at today is cheese. So following on from our milk and our dairy products, the last dairy product we're going to look at is cheese. So we've done the cream, we have looked at butter, we've looked at yogurt, and today we're looking at cheese. So overall cheese is a very, very nutritious food, full of nutrients, and a very, very good food in terms of energy for teenagers and young people. Easy to digest, very good for elderly people. It's a cheap source of protein. But on the downside, your cheddar cheese will have saturated fat and cholesterol. So it's just getting the balance, making sure that you're choosing the right type of cheese for you. So being very careful if we have heart disease, that we are careful how much cheddar cheese that we take in due to the high level of saturated fat and cholesterol. So that's the main thing about cheese, but overall it's a very nutritious and cheap source of protein. So let's just look here at our learning outcomes for the chapter. So the main learning outcomes are what we want to find out and what we want to make sure we know by the end of the chapter. So to define cheese, so what is cheese? Why is it useful? The nutritive value and the dietetic value. So just making sure you know the difference there. The nutritive value is the type of protein and fat and carbohydrate and what vitamins and minerals and how much water cheese contains. And then the dietetic value is linking the nutritive value to a particular diet. So linking the nutritive value to a particular diet. So for example, there, cheese contains an excellent source of high biological value protein needed for growth. This is important in the diets of teenagers and children because they are growing. So you're linking the nutrient directly to the diet. So that's the dietetic value. Then the composition is the percentage of how much protein, fat, carbohydrate, etc. is in cheese, the uses of cheese, and then the classification, which is interesting. The hard, the semi-soft, the soft. Okay, so we're moving on now to the next slide. We don't need to take down, but this one here, cheese is a concentrated form of milk. So again, as you know, cheese comes from milk. Very nutritious and versatile. So that word versatile is something you see a lot in home economics. It means that it has many different uses, lots of different uses. So for example, you may say cheese can be used as part of a dessert. Example, cream cheese, as we know, Philadelphia is used to make cheesecake. You may say another use is cheese is used in main courses. For example, cheese sauce in lasagna. Okay, so moving on to the nutritive value there that we need to take down. So excellent source of high biological value protein, and the main protein here, as you see, is casein. So casein is the protein in cheese. You'll see it there. So just making sure those keywords stand out, making sure your protein, fat, carbohydrate, vitamins, minerals, water, those little headings all stand out with a different color, and then your keywords like HBV protein, casein. Moving on to fat, keyword saturated fat. So it is not a good type of fat in cheddar cheese. But if you were looking at something like cheddar cheese versus pastry would have a lot of saturated fat in it. It would have a lot of fat, but it would have very little other nutritional value, whereas cheese is a highly nutritious food, even though it's saturated fat. And for teenagers, you're energetic, you're burning off that fat. Carbohydrate, it lacks, as the lactose, that sugar in the milk, has converted to lactic acid, which we'll see in the manufacture later on. Vitamin A for our eyesight and growth, and B for energy release, and then calcium for our bones and teeth. So they're the key points there that we want to take from that. And then looking at what's not in milk, what's not present. So there's no carbohydrate or vitamin C or iron. Okay, so let's look at the dietetic value. So again, we're directly linking the different parts of the cheese to a diet. So that fact that it's high in saturated fat, so needs to be avoided by those on a low cholesterol diet and a low calorie diet. Pregnant women need to avoid soft cheese because there is a risk of listeria in a cream cheese or a soft cheese like brie or camembert. Some of those cheeses are unpasteurized, which wouldn't be good for a pregnant woman, for the risk of bacteria. So just you need to be careful there. Hard cheese needs to be grated in order, or use a little bit of mustard with it in order to help digestion. Now, an example of where you would use mustard would be if you're making a cheese sauce. I would always put in a little pinch of dried mustard, and that would help to aid digestion. So then looking at the main growth element with cheese, we have protein for growth, calcium for growth of bones, and vitamin A for growth. So they're your growth nutrients. So therefore you're linking that then to children, teens, and pregnancy for the growth element. Versatile, there's that word again, many different uses. It's cheap, there's no waste, and there's very little preparation needed. Okay, and then the composition. The composition then, we're looking here at the percentages. So an easy way to remember this is it's roughly a third protein, a third fat, and a third water. Now, in or around, so 27%, 26% protein, 33 fat, and 37 water. So you're talking in or around a third of cheddar cheese is protein, a third is fat, don't forget it's saturated, and a third is water. Okay? Right, so moving on now to the uses. So when you're discussing the uses, or if you're asked in an exam about the uses, always make sure that you have the use and then you link it to an example. You do not use the example as your answer. You have the use, then you link it to an example. So let's just look at how you would do that. So you can see there in a sauce, example, cheese sauce.
Mommy.
As a dessert, example. As a garnish, example, French onion soup. You might say main ingredient, example, macaroni and cheese. In baking, example, cheese scones. So you have the category first and then the example. And then we'll move down then just to the classification. So again, you're going to do this in table format. Now, unfortunately, myself and Miss Cowan would always bring in examples of different cheeses that you would see in different categories. Okay, so for example, we'd always bring in some mozzarella and brie and camembert and Edam and different cheeses to get you to taste them. So just look at the categories here. We have hard, which is your cheddar, and parmesan. Now, you would use parmesan. You'd see it sometimes grated in Italian restaurants to sprinkle on top of your spaghetti bolognese or your matriciana or whatever Italian dish you're having. A semi-hard, which has a little bit of softness to it, but it's so the semi-hard, then you would have Edam. So Edam is the one there. It's generally cut in wedges, and it would have a red skin that you don't eat. It has a red hard skin. Okay. Gouda then is quite a mild cheese. It's a Dutch cheese. And so is Edam, is a Dutch cheese as well. And then you have your soft cheeses, so mozzarella. So there in the middle there you see your mozzarella balls. They're your fresh mozzarella balls there, and that has a very stretchy elasticity to it. So it has a stretched curd, so when you put that on top of pizza or anything like that, it stretches out and it goes very stringy. So that's why mozzarella is usually served on top of pizza. Feta cheese then is a Greek cheese. It is quite crumbly and very white, and it has little holes in it. And then you have brie and camembert. They have an external mold, so that means they have a mold on the outside. Now there's camembert on the bottom right hand corner of this picture of the screen there. You'll see camembert. Generally it's cut in wedges as well, or you can buy it round, but that that mold on the outside is completely edible. You can eat that. And brie is very similar looking to that as well. It's a little bit milder and it is cut in wedges generally as well. So they're both French cheeses. Camembert is actually a little village in France. I was in it. And then an internal mold, then here we have them here. You have Stilton and Cashel Blue, quite strong. Mold is injected into the cheese during manufacture, but it is edible and it's absolutely fine to eat. Okay. So we're nearly there. So we're going to skip down. So there's a lot of those slides there in between that you don't need to be taking down because we have a lot of repetition in the slides, just in terms of, you know, if we're in class, you don't need to take down slide 13 or 14 or 15 or 16 or 17, okay, or indeed 18, 19 or 20. So they're not needed. We're going straight to slide 21, which is buying cheese. So buying in small amounts, check the date stamp and ensure it's not damaged. So again, the same points as we'd looked at in our previous chapter. And storing, take out of the fridge 30 minutes before using. That would be an important point. And wrap in grease proof or place in a container. Grate leftover hard cheese and store in a jar and use as a garnish. So it's a great way of, I would add it to, you know, pasta bakes and things like that on top, or gratin dishes where you sprinkle breadcrumbs and cheese on top. It's a great way of adding nutrition to food. Now, the effects of cooking is the last little part. So, of course, the fat melts. The protein coagulates, as it always does when you heat it, and the cheese shrinks. Microorganisms are destroyed and it browns due to the dry heat. It's easy to overcook, so be careful, because if you overcook it, it can become very indigestible and difficult for people to digest. Now, unfortunately, we won't be able to do a demonstration, so we're moving into just some key terms and then the production then to finish up. So, culture. What's a culture? Well, we're going to be looking at that now in the production. In cheese making, cultures are used to start the process. So, lactic acid bacteria is the culture that's used, and it converts the sugar in milk, which is lactose, to an acid. And that curdles your milk. And you'll all know the nursery rhyme, Little Miss Muffet sat on her turfet eating her curds and whey. So when that acid is present in the milk, it separates it and curdles it into curds and whey. So the curds are the solid parts, which are chopped and pressed and molded to make your cheese, and the whey is drained away. So rennet is an enzyme in the stomach of a calf, which is used as well to help the milk to coagulate. Curds then are the solid part and whey is the liquid part, which is drained away. So let's look at the production now. So we've 2 pages here, and this is very, very important. So take these down in numbered points and highlight your keywords, please. So here we go. We're starting off with milk, and that's our first and foremost, we start off with the milk. So milk is pasteurized to kill bacteria. The starter culture that we just looked at there, the lactic acid bacteria, is added to convert the lactose to lactic acid. The milk is heated to 30 degrees Celsius, and rennet, that enzyme from the stomach of a calf, is added. And it coagulates the milk into curds and whey. So those 3 points are extremely important, and you need to learn them well. So pasteurized, starter culture, and rennet. So now what happens? Well, the curd is chopped and the whey is drained away. So at this stage you have cottage cheese. Now, cottage cheese is a very healthy cheese. It's only 4% fat as opposed to 33% fat in your cheddar. So a low-fat diet, you'd put cottage cheese on the menu in a salad. Then the curd is scalded to remove excess whey. And then the curds settle and stick together and the blocks are cut, and this piled together, this is known as cheddaring. It's cut again and salt is added. Hot water is sprayed on the mould to protect it, and then it's left to mature for anything up to 12 months. So this diagram here shows cheese being made. Okay. Right, so that is actually the very last slide that you will have to take down, number 27. So once you finish the production, you will finish your note taking at that, and make sure that your notes are taken down neatly and tidily, please, for both classes, and then you will upload them onto Google Classroom, and myself and Miss Cowan